if there's a shock. So we're hired, I think, to have long horizons. And with that long horizon point of view, it's very important that we do get inflation back to where it should be. I don't disagree with Adam Posen in the last session about why exactly it should be 2, but it's hard to come up with reasons to go far below 2 as a steady state number. But I think also what's interesting in terms of the other thing I do think we more elastic than we expected. At one level, that's a very good news story, that we did have a lot of, we turned out we could create more jobs than we thought. I mean, I know that that's true in the US, it's definitely true in Europe, that the surprise of the kind of point at which wage pressures kick in was so much lower than ex-ante expected. That is a good news. The flip side of that is maybe a regret that monetary policy was not more aggressive, at an earlier point. And that's the lesson, is that we should be more optimistic about the labour market and therefore recognise that we should be more aggressive on monetary policy at an earlier point. So I think to me this is a little bit of a leading question, which is yes, at a point in time, but for business cycle management, we do need inflation to get back, to the conventional 2, where the 2 is exactly the right place. We can talk about it, but I don't think 1, 1.5. That's a lot of policy space. From the amount we need to do with APP and other measures to get, say, 100 basis points of foundation. If we get 100 basis points of policy space just by nudging inflation back towards 2, I think for a long horizon, that's what we're doing.
Excellent, thank you very much. Now let me move to Caroline. In many advanced economies, numerical inflation targets have remained broadly constant despite changing circumstances. Even in Canada, where you go through a periodic period of revision, the target has remained at 2%. So should central banks try to create room for policy maneuver by raising the targets?
Well, it's a sensible question to ask. It's true, we have targeted 2%. Since 1995, many central banks are targeting something quite similar. And in fact, for quite a long time, it's served us very well. But with the neutral rate of interest having fallen so much, our estimates are that in nominal terms it's in the 2.25 to 3.25 range. It does give us less room to maneuver. And that's an issue because the monetary policy tools that we have at our disposal outside interest rates may be less effective, especially for a small open economy like Canada. But also, it may force us to follow low for long strategies that might be effective at boosting demand, but may also, and probably also, exacerbate financial vulnerabilities and create boom-bust cycles. And so definitely it's a natural thing to think about. In our renewal of our inflation control agreement with the government, which we do, and we have done every 5 years since 1991, the last one we did was in 2016, and we looked precisely at the question of whether we should raise the inflation target to, say, 3 or 4%. And of course, it's not surprising that all our research showed that, yes, it actually would give us more room to maneuver. It would reduce quite a lot the probability of hitting the effective lower bound. And at the same time, it's a framework that people are familiar with. And so, there were some positives. But of course, you're not going to pick a monetary policy framework on that criteria alone. Right? It would make our jobs
Lean
easier.
your head back.
You have to think about other things that relate to, well, how would that policy affect real people? And how would it affect them differently? And how would it affect your country? And is it feasible? And so on how it affects people, well, we know also from our research that a higher inflation rate would affect everybody, but it would be worse for people who are having lower incomes or are living on fixed incomes. With respect to feasibility, here we are wondering if we can get to 2%, and so one has to ask whether or not we can get to 3%. it's possible to adjust inflation expectations upwards, but our credibility is on the line in one sense in trying to achieve that. And I think the credibility is on the line as well in another dimension, which is if we do succeed, then you have to wonder, that'd be great for a while, but you have to wonder whether or not people will say, well, not two, if not two, but three, why not 3 and 4, and where would that lead? And so we decided ultimately not to go that way. Now, in this particular renewal series that we're doing now that's set for 2021, we are doing a full horse race